December the 10th. We seem to have got out of the rough stuff and are now heading, heading for Mount Melbourne. Although we've ascended several hillocks since the one from which I had my view yesterday, we've not had nearly so good a one again. I estimate the barrier edge to be about 10 miles off. Our depot to be at about 20. Rations are very short and I'm hungry. I feel as if we had very little chance of the pole. 2 or 3 days now the journey will show us. December the 11th, really a joyful day. Marched 3 miles, 1,000 yards. Camped within about a mile of the sea and 5 or 6 miles of the foot of the Nansen Glacier. They had to climb several very high glaciers in order to do this. Everything seemed to jump closer to us this morning. The Nansen Glacier looks good going, icy and not very rough. The low sloping shores marked on the map appear to be a mystery or a myth. Lots of seals in sight. And then a couple of weeks later, December 28th, run 10 miles, altitude 4,650 feet. And we had to dip into a hollow about 100 foot deep, caused by the head of the Nansen Glacier. Besides this, we stopped for 1 hour after for Mawson to take dip observations. So I'm pleased on the whole. We're not losing strength. Mawson is afraid that his observations make the pole further than he had placed it, that is 170 miles from here. He cannot be very certain, however, without more observations. The day began very warm, plus 23 degrees, and completely overcast, but now at 8:20 p.m. it feels much colder. I'll cut the rest of that. Mawson now says that the nearest the pole can be is 170 miles and the furthest 230. If the former, we can do it. If the latter, we may possibly. January the 1st, we all wished each other Happy New Year, and we ought to be happier than we were at Christmas, where we had a much better prospect of reaching the pole. Run 10 miles, altitude 6,980 feet. Temperature +6 to +17, no wind. Cut a bit there. Mawson is giving us a special thick hoosh by way of a New Year's Day dinner. I've just finished it and could easily eat 3 more of the same. Of course, our hunger is simply agonising. Well, we can't have more than a month of it now. January the 8th. 10 miles, 8,900 feet, -15 to -10, a most dreadful day, a strong blizzard, almost a beam and very bad surface. I never felt in lower spirits. We tore the tent badly in putting it up for lunch and had to patch it while it was up after dinner. All clothes which were drying got covered up with snowdrift and my hands went completely several times. Pray God we may never have another. We marched right through it. January 13th. 13 miles, and now 9,000 feet high, temperature -6 to +2. Last night Mawson made the astounding announcement that the pole is probably 40 miles further off than we'd ever thought. He's led to think this from rereading the discovery reports and from his own observations. We were left to think over this during the night, and in the morning, after a very heated discussion, we determined to take it on. I, of course, agreed to go if the others were decided, but I said plainly, as I think now, that we've not got more than a 50% chance of getting back to the coast in time for the Nimrod to take us home. My reasons for thinking so are that the professor is very nearly crocked now, and we're both weak. That we've no reason to suppose that the first half of the journey back will be a bit easier than what we've already done, since any wind that we had during this part of the journey has been a beam or astern of us, and the Sestrugi point to this being the prevalent wind. And last, that we're making no allowance for weather so bad that we cannot travel. So that is how I feel. But then just 3 days later, up at 4:30, took sledge on with full load 2 miles, then offloaded everything but tent, sleeping bag, 2 days food and a few clothes. Sledged on another 6 miles, camped, lunched at 10:30. We're going to walk on from here another 5 miles with a compass to where Mawson thinks the pole must be. Last night she took a dip reading, giving him 0.12 degrees off the perpendicular. 3:45 p.m, just returned from the magnetic pole, 5 miles to northwest of us. We hoisted a Union Jack there, and the professor in a loud voice annexed the place. Mawson photographed the 3 of us by means of a string attached to a camera. Then it was only at my suggestion that Prof called for 3 cheers for the king. So this is the photo that Mawson took. This is them claiming the magnetic pole for Great Britain. I'm not entirely sure how you can claim a magnetic pole when it moves around, but they managed to do it. And the journey back, sorry, I should say, this is Mawson on the right, David in the middle, and Mackay on the left here. I'll skip most of the journey back, which was extremely long and arduous, and we'll cut on to February the 3rd, by which time we finally managed to reach the sea again. Relieved from cooking, thank God. The last week has been so eventful that it would take as much writing about as any ordinary year. Between the time we decided to come straight down the Larsen Glacier and now, we've had so many disappointments and difficulties that I don't think anything can daunt us now. The main point is we've just reached the sea within sight of our Drygalski depot, but we've been thrown back by the horn of the little gulf that I marked on the map to the north of the depot. This is due to our having approached the depot in a wrong bearing. We must now sledge back around the tip of the horn, but we have penguins and seals galore within sight. We've just had our first taste of emperor. The other important event is that I've deposed the professor. I simply told him that he was no longer fit to lead the party, that the situation was now critical, and that he must officially appoint Mawson leader, or I would declare him, the professor, physically and mentally unfit. He acted on my proposal at once. We are now, of course, expecting the ship. The professor says that Shackleton promised to send her to look for us on the 1st, but one can't believe a word he sends. And just 2 days later, by an absolute miracle, 8 a.m, February the 6th, while we were inside the tent having our first good feed of fried seal meat, cooked over the blubber lamp, we heard a gun go off. Mawson jumped up, yelling, "It's a gun from the ship!" This was about 4 p.m. Sure enough, it was the ship, come right into the creek and lying within half a mile of us. We all ran to the water's edge, and Mawson went bang down a crevasse more than 20 feet deep. This might have been very serious, but luckily there was soft snow at the bottom and he was not much hurt. I can't possibly tell all that happened next, for I must confess my eyes were a little dim. In less than no time, we were eating anything we could lay our hands on, drinking bubbly wine and revelling in the sight of friendly faces and the sound of friendly voices. Almost all the news was good, though there was still no news of the Southern Party. We were relieved from a very real peril of death. I'd made up my mind that if the ship had not turned up on the 5th, or shortly after, we might pretty well give her up. We would then have had to start down the coast with all our rations exhausted, that is to say, nothing to live on but seal meat, and with our tent, clothes utterly worn out. The professor could not have lived many weeks, and his weakness would have delayed us to such an extent as to finish us. The whole thing is enough to make a man turn religious. So it's a pretty amazing thing, and in total they actually walked for over 1,200 miles, which actually stood as a record for the longest unsupported sledge journey right up until the 1980s. It was pretty incredible. So as soon as Mackay got back, he immediately wrote to D'Arcy and said, "I tried pretty hard to bring home some things that would interest you, but we left in a great hurry. I was on the party which got to the top of Erebus, and also on the party which got to the magnetic pole. I would rather have been on the southern party, as their performance was more heroic, which clearly it wasn't. I believe a great many people have been running down Shackleton in his absence. This is a bit unfair for more reasons than one. I never want to serve under a better leader. He has asked me to come with him again." And D'Arcy replied, "It was good of you to write to me, and better still to think of me now and then during the expedition. I gave more than a passing thought to you every now and then, and I rejoiced with you in all your great success. As for Shackleton, all that you say simply confirms my own opinion. He is a good man, and must be a good man to do as he has done. But his men were good too. If you have any beasts for our museum, I shall of course be delighted to have them, and be grateful for them." So we don't actually know what else was brought back from the expedition for D'Arcy, but it does include our splendid king penguin, and this is the original case that it was displayed in, which we still have it in today. This is it inside the museum. And the penguin has also had his fair share of interesting visitors. Here's Lorraine Kelly coming to say hello to him. And he also occasionally gets to go on trips to the seaside. This was the photographer Peter Adamson published a book of photographs in Dundee. It was determined to include our penguin, but said we have to photograph him on the seaside. So we kind of carted him off to Broughty Ferry Beach, and he sat there on an extremely windy day. And I was terrified he was going to sort of fly off out to sea. But luckily, he came back safe and sound. And just to conclude the story of Mackay, like so many of these Antarctic explorers, no matter how awful the experience that they went through was, as soon as they got back, they were desperate to go out again. And he immediately made contact with William Spears Bruce, and together they planned to an expedition where they were hoping to map a large part of the Antarctic coastline. Unfortunately, they never managed to get the funding for that. As Mackay mentioned in that last letter, Shackleton had said that he wanted him to come with him again on his next expedition, which was the Trans-Antarctic expedition on board the Endurance. But Mackay was too eager to go off somewhere, and he didn't wait for that. And so the year before, in 1913, he accepted an offer to join the Canadian Arctic expedition on board a ship called the Carluke. And that actually had a similar fate to the Endurance. It got trapped in the ice, and they all had to abandon ship. The ship kind of was crushed by the ice. They set up camp there, and then a rescue party set off trying to find some help. And unlike Shackleton's party, where of course famously they all survived, unfortunately, Mackay was part of this rescue party. They disappeared and were never heard of again. So it's assumed that he died somewhere in the ice in 1914, but his body was never found. So I realise it's a really downbeat end to the story, but I think it's these kind of extraordinary tales of adventure and so on make these specimens all the more special and make it all the more important that we look after them and keep them and that you come and see them. So I will end there. Thank you very much.